Hello and welcome to the Blitz, the NFL Defense Analysis Podcast for Week 17, final week of the regular season. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Josh Shepardson at BChad50. You're not going to be surprised by a lot of these, but still a lot to play for in Week 17. Some things that we thought may not have been the case a few weeks ago, even this week, really. Carolina Panthers against the Buccaneers, you got as your top cash game play, or as an elite play, maybe not the top play, but 5,200 on FanDuel, 36 on DraftKings. All of a sudden, you lose one game, and you got to look in the rearview mirror. All of a sudden, they haven't locked up home field. Arizona is coming right behind them, looking as good as they ever have with the chance. So Carolina, yes, they're huge favorites, but they were huge favorites last week, too, and had a letdown against the Falcons. So it would be one hell of a fall if the Panthers fell from 14-0 to not even getting home field. But you got to imagine this elite unit is going to be able to stop Jameis Winston in a huge game.
Yeah, I mean, for Week 17 purposes, last week's loss was probably the best thing that could happen to the Panthers. I mean, sure, you can say they would be playing for an undefeated record, and that has some value. But I'll tell you what has a lot more value, that number one seed in the NFC. And if they lose and the Cardinals win, the Panthers move to the number 2 seed instead of the number 1 seed. They don't have home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And that's a big loss for a team that opened up with 14 straight wins to start the season. They are big favorites. They're 10.5-point favorites. They absolutely clowned the Buccaneers in Week 4. They allowed the most yardage that they've allowed all year in 411. But they also forced 5 turnovers, intercepting Jameis Winston 4 times. So you have to like that a defense like the Panthers that can force turnovers, get sacks, pressured Jameis Winston into making mistakes. And you figure Winston has toned down his turnovers. He's played better as the season goes along. But I just don't think the matchup is obviously good for Winston, which is good news for this defense. And this is a defense that ranks among the best in terms of yards per play allowed, turnovers forced, sacks. They're allowing fewer than 20 points per game, so they can do it across the board, which gives them a high floor and a high ceiling. And there aren't a lot of huge favorites this week. They're one of only 2 double-digit point favorites, and there aren't many favorites that are even touchdown favorites this week. So that big spread, the fact the Panthers are at home, everything really plays into them having both a really high floor and a high ceiling this week.
Yeah, and they're, as we know, they're just one of the best defensive units in the league, so it's hard not to have faith in them, and especially in an important game. Kansas City Chiefs, also with an important game, potentially. This is a team that clinched a playoff spot after being 1-5, won 9 games in a row. They did have a chance at coming back and getting the division from the Broncos. I don't know the actual scenario with that now. I believe it's still if they win, Broncos lose, they still take it, but I'm not sure about that one. I think a couple other things have to fall. But either way, there is some seeding to play for the Chiefs still, potentially. So and this team has played very well. Last week, from a DFS perspective, they were disappointing. But they got the job done, only gave up 13 points to the Browns. They just didn't do it in a flashy, get you a lot of points type of way.
Yeah, and as you noted, there is seeding to play for in this game. I believe the Chiefs have already clinched a playoff berth, but I don't know how the tiebreakers work in terms of the wild cards at this point. They certainly don't want to lose and have the Jets win, and all of a sudden they're not getting to face the AFC South representative. To say the least, you want that AFC South representative badly in the first round. You don't want to face either the AFC North or the AFC West representative in the first round of the playoffs. Considerably better teams. The Texans can play defense, but it's a good matchup. So this is a defense that should be motivated, a team that should be motivated. That's reflected in the spread. Odds makers are expecting the Chiefs to come out and do what they're supposed to do. They're 7-point favorites at home against the Raiders. They played very well against the Raiders in Week 13, forcing 3 turnovers and sacking Derek Carr 4 times while allowing just 20 points to the Raiders. This time they get them in Kansas City, and the Chiefs have been very good at home this year. They're not allowing a lot of scoring. They've only allowed 2 opponents to score 20 or more points this season in Kansas City. So Arrowhead is considered one of the better stadiums to play in the league for home games. And they're constantly challenging the Seahawks for that ridiculous Guinness Book of World Records volume nonsense. So it is typically a very good stadium to play in for them. They play well at home, but more importantly, they've just been an awesome elite defensive unit all year. They rank amongst the best in the league in points allowed per game, yards per play, turnovers, sacks. They can score in a variety of ways, fantasy points. And they've even scored some defensive touchdowns this year. So all of that adds up to a very high ceiling, also a high floor unit. I'd say their floor is probably a little bit lower than that of the Panthers because they are facing a better offense, a better quarterback in Derek Carr. But I would say their ceiling is also probably a little bit higher because they've really been playing better defense than the Panthers of late. So I do like the Chiefs. They are my favorite defense this week, and really like them a lot.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with any of that. Next up, the Jets at your Buffalo Bills. Speaking of games with everything on the line, I mean, Jets win this game, they're in the playoffs for sure. They lose this game, they probably will not be in the playoffs. Not certainty. Obviously, other teams will have to win too. But, I mean, everything riding on this game for the Jets. Team that's riding high, knocking off the Patriots last week to jump back into the 6th spot. And, I mean, everything here and all the narratives, it's against Rex Ryan and the Bills. It's a division game. I mean, this is going to be a fun game to watch because, like I said, everything on the line for them and kind of a lot on the line for Rex Ryan too because everyone knows he wants to be the one to beat the Jets and knock them out of the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one real Super Bowl in the season, but the Bills are having 2 regular season Super Bowls facing the Jets. I mean, this is their game, but at the same time, odds makers recognize that the Jets should be favored, and they are favored. They're 3-point road favorites. This game probably will remain close, but the Bills are a run-heavy team. No team's been more successful running the ball this year than the Bills. Granted, they're probably going to be without LaShawn McCoy. Maybe they'll change their game plan as a result. But point being, they've found a lot of success on the ground. No one's found success on the ground against the Jets this year. They are the best run defense in terms of yards allowed per game. And they've held teams to just 2 rushing touchdowns all year. So if you're trying to make hay on the ground against the Jets, you're pretty much banging your head against the wall. Bad matchup for the Bills in terms of that. Also just a bad matchup because the Jets are a fantastic defense. They rank among the league leaders in points allowed per game, yards allowed per play, turnovers and sacks. This is another defensive unit like the elite units above that rank highly in every notable defensive category. And at 2,800 on DraftKings, I absolutely love their price. I think their floor is very high, maybe as high as anybody's on the slate, right in that mix with the Chiefs. I don't necessarily think their ceiling is quite as high, but if they do race out to a big lead, I mean, they definitely have some pass rushers to get after Tyrod Taylor, and they have Revis take Sammy Watkins away. And he did take Sammy Watkins away the first time. So there's definitely some upside here, but I love this floor, and I love the price tag on DraftKings more than anything.
Yeah. I mean, I love, especially Week 17, and so many meaningless games, targeting the ones with so much on the line are just, it's fun, and it makes sense. This next game does not have anything on the line, though. The Rams against the 49ers, and if you told me earlier this season the Rams would win 2 games against the Seahawks, I tend to think they might have a chance of making the playoffs, especially in a weak NFC, but that's not the case. They pretty much only played well against the Seahawks this season. So, but this is still a good unit. I mean, one of the better front sevens in football, facing a Blaine Gabbert-led 49ers team that they're just a bad offense. They're not horrible. They're not the worst at anything. They're just not good at anything.
Yeah, this is Jeff Fisher in a nutshell. He's going to close the season with 2 wins with the Rams. They're going to say that the team is on the rise and that they're just a quarterback away. I mean, this is like Jeff Fisher's career in a nutshell. This is peak Jeff Fisher, basically. But anyway, the Rams defense coming off of a big effort against the Seahawks. They're facing the lowest scoring team in the league in the 49ers. The 49ers are averaging fewer than 15 points per game, which is just remarkable in today's offensive-driven NFL. I mean, it's half as many points as some of the better teams are scoring per game in the NFL this season, which is just unreal. Yep. But the 49ers don't turn the ball over a ton, and that's partly a product of Blaine Gabbert just being unwilling to take chances. Football Outsiders has a analysis every week called the Alex analysis, where they look at quarterbacks and their tendencies on third down, whether they're throwing past the sticks or throwing short of the sticks. And Gabbert, I mean, he leads the way in throws short of the sticks. He's not taking any chances. He is out Alex Smithing Alex Smith, which is pretty remarkable, who this is named after. But anyway, not taking chances, and he's taking a ton of sacks, 52. for the 49ers this year. No team's allowed more sacks. So pretty high, really high floor for the Rams. Again, another high floor unit because they're not going to give up many points. They're going to record sacks. They might not force many turnovers, which lowers their ceiling. This is a game that I joked around with you before the podcast that, I mean, this may end in record time. The Rams just want to run the ball and keep the clock moving. 49ers are perfectly content taking sacks and not scoring points. So, I mean, this is a game that could be over in record time. And when there just aren't plays being run and there aren't clock stoppages and there aren't points being scored, you're talking about a really high floor, and that's what you get with the Rams. 4,600, okay salary at FanDuel. I mean, really as cheap as I would be willing to pay down to. I'm more inclined to pay up for the top defenses at FanDuel just because the pricing is so tightly clustered. But on DraftKings, 3,000 is a really good price and does offer $1,000 or a little over $1,000 of salary relief from the top units there, like the Chiefs. So definitely a little bit more to be gained by using them on DraftKings.
Yeah, and I mean, you wish we could give this the Madden treatment where you can kind of set the clock to, okay, once all my players are set up, I've got 10 seconds left. You have to snap right then, and we can just kind of avoid 15 seconds of each play because, I mean, if you're watching this game, then, I mean, you are the ultimate dedicated fan, or you're waiting, or you've got a ton of money riding on one of these teams or something. I don't know, but I won't be watching this game. No thanks. Maybe I'll watch highlights if there's a bunch of sacks. Maybe a Clay Matthews pretending to help someone up, something like that. But no thanks. This game's going to be ugly. The Denver Broncos next up against the Chargers. I'm not in a point in my life right now coming off that loss to the Broncos last night where I want to say a bunch of kind things about the Broncos. So it's hard to argue that they're one of, if not the best defense in the league, obviously. Facing off now against Phillip Rivers and the Chargers, who been decimated with injuries. They throw a ton. That's not a good scenario against the Broncos. So everything points towards them winning this game. But I'm holding on to the glimmer of hope, personally, that Phillip Rivers has one last hurrah in a Chargers uniform and knocks off the Broncos. But it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable that I'm dating myself at this point by saying this, but as somebody who grew up and loved old school, earmuffs might be in order for you as I gush a little bit about the Broncos here. I mean, this is a matchup made in heaven for them. They are the best pass defense in the league right now. They're the only pass defense allowing fewer than 200 passing yards per game, and they're facing the team that has passed the ball more than anyone this year. Like the Bills with running the football against the Jets, probably not going to have success. This is the exact same scenario with the Chargers airing the ball out a ton and the Broncos being great at preventing teams from picking up yardage and doing much through the air. They've allowed the fewest yards per play in the league this year. They're one of just a handful of teams allowing fewer than 20 points per game so far this year. They lead the league in sacks with 49. And they rank in the top 10 in turnovers forced with 26. So, I mean, they can do it all. And there just aren't enough weapons on the Chargers to keep this Broncos defense honest. And they just don't have the receivers to break away from their top flight corners. They don't have the type of offensive line to keep the Broncos from continuing to pad their league lead in sacks either. So this is a really high ceiling unit. And they cost a lot. They're $5,200 on FanDuel. They're $4,000 on DraftKings. But they are a great swerve off of the Kansas City Chiefs and GPPs.
Yeah. I want to argue with you there, but I cannot. The Patriots next up. You mentioned no spread on this one yet. Probably waiting on the status of all these wide receivers for the Patriots. But facing a Dolphins team that has been awful, has nothing to play for except for hoping for a miracle to play spoiler, but no one's sitting here holding their breath thinking that there's a chance that the Dolphins win this game regardless of the spread. But like you mentioned, though, there is something to play for the Patriots because should they somehow stumble and lose this game and the Broncos win, the Broncos would take over home field because obviously they have the tiebreaker over the Patriots with the win that they had. So it's not a likely scenario for the Patriots to lose this game, which is what makes them such a great defensive play. And they got a ton of playmakers in that defense too.
Yeah, and you got to know that Bill Belichick is absolutely pounding the table and reminding them this week, focus, focus, focus. We still are playing for that number one seed, and that's just the carrot that I want them to have. I mean, I can't see him resting players, which is big. If they already had the one seed sewed up, Belichick is a coach that is willing to rest his players. if the Patriots are resting players, it likely means that defense fueled a big blowout early, and you got your points already. So by the time they go to these reserves, you're going to be fine. They already spanked the Dolphins once. They did it in prime time on Thursday Night Football, beating them 36-7. Pretty much throwing a wet blanket on this Dan Campbell parade that started with 2 wins after the Dolphins bye, in which they scored 82 points. Since those two efforts resulted in 82 points, they've reached or bested 20 points in just 3 of 9 games. 2 of those contests, they hit exactly 20 points. They are not scoring. 19.3 points per game, ranks 26th in the NFL. They've served up the 6th most sacks with 44 allowed this season. And New England ranks 2nd in the league in sacks. So, I mean, this is a defense that's going to be able to pin their ears back. And a guy like Chandler Jones has to be licking his chops thinking about getting after Ryan Tannehill, Miko Grimes' favorite player this week.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be a fun thing to watch to see who she decides to blame this week. But I think we know what the answer to that is. Next up, we've got the Arizona Cardinals. And if you watched that game last week, I was still a somewhat believer in the fact that the Green Bay Packers could compete in that game, I guess it was. And that was not the case. I know the Packers are not the offense that they were in past years with Jordy Nelson, but this Arizona defense is also a whole new animal. And this unit is playing as well as any unit in the league. And it is the Seahawks, yes, but if you saw that anemic Seahawks offense last week, I'm not saying it's going to be that bad again, but that offense did not look good last week. And that's against the Rams' defense is significantly worse than Arizona. So Arizona with everything to play for, Seattle fighting for playoff positioning as well. I'm siding with Arizona on this one.
Yeah, so am I. I mean, they already beat the Seahawks in Seattle earlier in the year. That game was looked like it was going to be a blowout. Seattle stormed back. A defensive touchdown certainly helped them there. But, I mean, they're the host this time. They've got plenty to play for. Their offense can match or exceed the point scoring of what Seattle's capable of. And, I mean, the defense is right on par with the Seahawks as well, if not better, even with the Honey Badger down. Another team that can get after the quarterback and force turnovers. They've only allowed 18.5 points per game this year, so they're not giving up many points. Last week illustrated what kind of ceiling this unit has with the sacks, with the defensive touchdowns, with the turnovers forced, with the low point scoring allowed. And that was against an Aaron Rodgers-led Packers team that, granted, the offense is not what it usually is under Aaron Rodgers. Jordy Nelson's absence has really crippled that offense quite a bit. But, I mean, they clowned one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL last week. In GPPs, you're chasing ceiling, and the Cardinals have it for days. There's some low floor as well, but you have to embrace volatility in GPPs, and that's why the Cardinals, they're more than the flavor of the week, and you're not chasing points, but you are recognizing that they demonstrated their upside last week, and that's what you could get. I mean, probably not that, but multiple sacks, multiple turnovers, and a defensive touchdown are all within reach for the Cardinals, even against a Seahawks team led by Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned that game last week. I mean, I haven't checked on this, but I saw a stat that said that was the second highest defensive score anyone's had the entire season. And like you said, they did that against the Green Bay Packers, so not an easy task. Next up, Washington Redskins. Not much to play for here, so like you mentioned, it's possible that we don't know what Jay Gruden's going to do. He's never been in this spot before as a head coach, but playing a Cowboys team that, I mean, this team couldn't score on anyone right now. I mean, everyone says things about the college teams versus the pro teams, things like that. I'm not going to be that idiot that says things like that. But, I mean, you imagine that a top-tier college team would at least, be able to stop them on a couple drives. I mean, this team's horrible. They have a good offensive line. You got no Dez Bryant. You got no Tony Romo. And you're down to quarterbacks that aren't even outcasts anymore. They're quarterbacks that aren't even has-beens. They're guys who never got a shot and were never going to get a shot.
Yeah, I mean, it's week 17, and we finally reached a defense that comes with a caveat. We need to keep an eye on what Jay Gruden does. As you noted, he hasn't really been in this position before. If he announces he's going to sit Kirk Cousins, I would go ahead and advise against using them, just because if the offense can't hang any points, your upside's really limited, and you're only using this team in GPPs anyway, so the upside is all you're looking for. But if it looks like they're going to start their regulars, and if there isn't any murmurs, whispers of sitting regulars for the Redskins, then they're facing arguably the worst offense in football. They rank next to last in points scored per game, but if you're giving me a choice between Blaine Gabbert or Matt Castle or Kellen Moore, I'm taking Blaine Gabbert, which feels just crazy to say, but it's not really close either. Yeah. The offensive line for the Cowboys is fantastic, but beyond that, they don't have skill position players that scare you. They're just not doing anything. They can't move the ball. They can't score points. They can turn it over. I mean, they are tied for the second most turnovers this year. That's not quite the distinction you want as an offense, but with 29 of them, that certainly gives the Redskins some upside if they're going to play their regulars. And, I mean, the Redskins are right around league average in turnovers forced and the league average in sacks. So, I mean, they're an average-ish defense against a really bad offense. And at 2,800 on DraftKings, that's playable. I don't love them at FanDuel, and I would not use them at all at FanDuel. 4,700, not worth it. But at 2,800, you're going to get low ownership. You're going to get a plus matchup. And you're going to get big salary relief to spend up on skill position players, and that's plenty to use to justify using the Redskins. Who will likely be favored when a spread is posted, but that's all going to depend on who's projected to start at quarterback, really.
Yeah, they're probably waiting to see what quarterback they bring in off the street for this one, just in case. So, all right, that'll wrap things up here for us for Week 17 for the defense analysis. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the rest of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.